This episode is sponsored by Squarespace. Spend less time on your website and more time on your art. See that right there? This one is addressed for focus speed. So if you want to do rack focus, you can change the speed. You can do it really slow for more cinematic, or you can change it for very fast, very punchy. I memorize where these buttons are. That way I spend zero time with my face in the menu finding things. And with this camera, there are literally 100 different tools to help you nail exposure, composition, and focus. Combing through all of these, assigning a place for them, explaining what they do and how they help you is gonna be the point of this video. Also, assigning frame rate, codec, and shutter speed to the top dial here, so that with the twist of the dial, you can jump from 4K 60 to 4K 120 to 1080 240 without ever having to look in the menu. Yo, Josh, yo. So I've had this camera for about a year now, and it is incredible. The low light, the 4K 120, the 10-bit, the whole package. It's such a workhorse for me. In fact, I shot all of Anamorphia 2 pretty much with this camera. So if you're interested in what this camera can do, the stuff I was able to do with color grading, all right, let's jump in. First, let's do a factory reset. Let's get on the same page. Menu, briefcase, folder 2. You can save all of your settings on a memory card. I've already done that now, so just in case I mess up, or if you want to, like, let's say you rent out a bunch of cameras
and you want to transfer all of your settings over to all of the cameras,
this is exactly where you can do it. One of my favorite functions. So we'll go ahead and save our settings real quick. And now that that's saved, we're gonna go ahead and initialize. Most of the settings that we're gonna change are only gonna work when it's in movie mode. If you shoot in manual, some of the settings aren't gonna transfer over. That's just the way it is. Sony did a really good job. They created my menu setting. This is where we're gonna stick all of our own custom folders. That way you don't have to dig through the whole menu system to find the things that you want. So we're just gonna stick in the most used ones for me. So first, let's go to add item. First one I'm gonna stick in there is file format. This is where we're gonna choose our resolution and codec. So I'm gonna go ahead and change this to XAVC 4K. This is for the most part what I shoot in. It doesn't give you the biggest files, but it's also not the most compressed, and it's basically what my computer can edit on. The difference between the three 4K formats is mostly your post-processing. So if you're running gun and you have a decently fast computer, I would pick 4K XAVCS. So I'll stick that in menu number 1. Next, let's add movie settings. So, and we'll set that 24p, and we're gonna bump this up to 100 megabit, 10-bit. Perfect, that's done. Generally, I shoot everything in 10-bit, with the exception to the 120p 4K. That is just such a compressed file that my computer, which is still even like a 2017 iMac Pro, has a hard time editing those files. So generally, I kick the 120p down to 8-bit. It's still 4K, it still looks fantastic, but unless I'm gonna do some heavy color grading, I honestly can't tell the difference. Next, we're gonna add the S&Q settings. This is going to allow us to change the default slow-mo settings. You can access it quickly. All right, so the last one we're gonna do is the shoot interval function. This is so you can program it to do time lapses. All of the settings are right here. It's kind of a pain. They hit it in the menu, folder 4 shoot mode, and then down to interval shoot function. That's also gonna go in folder number 1. That way in one folder it has all of like the main stuff that I use the most. This one is just gonna be format. We're gonna put that in menu number 2. That way I don't accidentally format it if I don't mean to. For menu 3, this is where I do all the custom buttons as well, so I don't have to go digging and find it. So we go to briefcase, folder 3. You see how there's these 3 different ones? That one's for photo, this one is for video. I don't really care about modifying the photo one, so I'm just gonna stick the video one in there. So all of these settings are for filmmaking. I don't use any photo settings, mostly because if I do need photos, I just do a screen grab from the 4K and that looks sharp enough. Next, let's add the function menu setting one. This is to program the little function button on the back here. Camera set memory, that's so you can program these top dials here, the 1, 2, and 3. They kind of bury that in the menu as well. And then the last one is the save load setting, which we did in the very start of this video. Next, down to my menu 4, this is the one where I put all of the HDMI stuff. First one I put in there is the HDMI output settings. This is just gonna give us some of these outputs that I'll mess around with from time to time. Next, we have HDMI resolution. Certain monitors or live streaming devices have problems connecting when it says auto, so you have to physically change it to 2160 or to 1080p. The next one down is the HDMI display. Right now, it's on. That's why you're seeing this screen. It's actually recording on. If I were to take it off, now you see what my camera is seeing. I always keep that off. The last one is airplane mode. I have that actually switched to on. I'm not connecting to Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, so it just saves battery. But if I did want to control it with my phone, then I would have to turn that off. Now that the My menu is set, let's jump into customizing the buttons. First one, I'm actually gonna leave this not set. This is the rotation dial here, so turning this initiates it. I don't like that at all. I find that that's very counterintuitive. Make that not set. That way, it doesn't mess anything up. Function number 2, we're gonna reprogram the AEL button. This is the auto exposure lock. I don't really use that function at all, so I'm gonna reprogram this to something else. I'm gonna change this one to Gamma Display Select. Essentially what Gamma Display does is this is gonna toggle it on or off. And if you're shooting in S-Log3 or S-Log2 or any of the HyperLog gammas, it's going to add a temporary Rec 709 conversion LUT on the screen so you can monitor in Rec 709, and it helps you figure out exposure. So this is one of the tools that I use the most when I'm shooting log and just nailing exposure, making sure I'm not overexposing or underexposing. Very, very helpful. I probably use this one the most. Next, I'm gonna program the autofocus on button. This one normally in photo mode just tells the camera to focus, but if you're in auto continuous focusing, it's doing that anyway. So I'm gonna reprogram this. Instead of autofocus on, I'm gonna change it to autofocus hold. And what this does is it's now gonna tell the camera to stop focusing. And as soon as you release this button, it will set focus again. So next is the C1 button. I'm gonna program that to zoom. Having a toggle switch for zoom is very helpful because if you're shooting on an APS-C lens, you can just punch in camera and then you get full coverage. You don't get any vignette. Now that we got the zoom on here, I'm gonna change the zoom setting on digital zoom. That way, if I need to punch in zoom, I can go all the way up to 4 times zoom. Now you're not gonna get 4K out of it at that point, but it's very helpful if you're using manual lenses and you wanna just nail focus. And I'll explain why I do that in a few more steps. Next, we're gonna program the C3 button right here. I'm gonna change this one to steady shot. It's like left hand, boom. I know if I want active stabilization with the crop, or if I got it on a tripod, I want the full frame. I don't want any crop. I can toggle it on and off. 6 is the trash can. This is gonna be toggle autofocus on and off. It's very similar to what we did here, but in this case, I just hit it once and it toggles it on or off. And the reason why I do it twice is because I shoot a lot of myself, and if I need to nail focus with like a really long lens and I don't want it breathing around and tracking, I have a remote and I have it programmed to the trash can button. Trash can button. You know, like with this camera right here, just hit the trash can button and now it's locked. See what I mean? Next, we're gonna program the other buttons. So let's go to rear number 2. Number 1 is this button right here. I'm gonna change this to audio record input. Audio recording level. Perfect. It's prickly. It reminds me of like waveforms. So this is gonna adjust the audio. So if you're using an external mic, you can adjust that audio level really quickly. Generally, you wanna follow the power of the mic. So you would have this set at a certain level. In this case, I have this set at around 5, and then I adjust the audio level down to 7, and that works the best for me. All right, so number 2 is the center button here. I'm gonna use this for focus magnification. That way I'm shooting on a manual lens and it now focuses in. See how it says 4 times zoom right there? We can hit our C1 and we can take that all the way up to 4 times zoom, and then we hit the focus assist and now we have 16 times zoom. So we are like, what is that? I have no idea what that is, but it's in focus. If you use digital zoom, you're not getting real 4K. It may record a 4K file, but it's not giving you real 4K, so be careful with that one. But I do use it a lot, especially with manual lenses. Need to just nail focus perfectly. So number 3, we're gonna change this one to peaking display select. I don't use this one that much, but it is helpful sometimes if you are in focus or not, right? There we go. Let's see if it works with our digital zoom. Oh, wow, it works. And then, oh my goodness, we are 16 times zoom with peaking, and peaking is telling us if we're in focus. This is just explosion. Number 4 is already set to ISO. I'm gonna leave that. And number 5, I'm gonna use the same one that I did for the A7 III. I'm gonna change this one to monitor brightness. So you can change the brightness of the screen. This is very helpful shooting bright outdoors. You just toggle it down to sunny mode. Look how much brighter that is. Amazing. So on the top of the camera, we have 2 buttons that we can assign, not just the C2. We can actually program the record button. This is what I do because I actually tell the camera to record on the shutter button. For video mode, this doesn't change anything in terms of taking photographs. You can't use the shutter button in video mode to take photographs anyway. So this frees up an extra button for us. You don't have to do this, but if you do, you have to change shutter to record. Let's change this one to picture profile. In picture profile, this is where you're gonna access all of your, obviously profile settings. So if you shoot on S-Cinetone, or maybe you wanna shoot, S-Log3. C2, we're gonna change it to white balance. I use auto white balance a lot for a lot of things, but I also tend to use Kelvin as well because I don't like how it meters sometimes. Example, right now, if I use auto white balance, it's gonna be picking up a lot of this red and it's gonna make my skin tones look blue. But if I use Kelvin and I set it at 4200 Kelvin, then it's like it's perfect. And I know it matches across all my cameras. And frankly, if you nail white balance and exposure, you don't need to shoot raw. You can get just enough out of log. And the last one is that little button I showed you. So we're gonna change that to autofocus transition speed. We can do it fast or slow, depending on the lens. This is only available on lenses, the G Master lenses or the Sigma lenses that actually have a button on the lens. If your lens doesn't have a button on it, you can't use it. All right, so now that all the buttons are programmed, there's a couple of annoying settings that definitely you wanna have fixed. Number 1, the auto off. It turns off after like 1 minute, which is super annoying. I need it set to 5. So let's go to briefcase, power settings. We're gonna change this to 5 minutes. The next one, we're gonna do the auto temperature. We're gonna put that on high. Yep, perfect. So it's not gonna overheat as quickly when you're shooting like 4K 120. I actually like to reverse my aperture and my shutter speed dials. So we're gonna go into dial customize, and we're just gonna switch those. I feel like I mess with aperture way more than shutter speed, so I would prefer to have it like closer and easier for me to manipulate than all the way up in the front. Next, we're also gonna turn off the monitor right here. I never do this. That's the first time I've done that. Sometimes when you're shooting and you bump it, it turns off the screen like that. It's super annoying. Like, I get it, it's a nice emphasize display during record. This one adds a red box around the entire screen. If you're standing 10 feet away, I can clearly tell. If you're like me and you went out and bought one of these expensive CFast Express cards, but you never bothered to buy a card reader, or if you just lose your card reader, you can change the USB connection to mass storage, and now you can use the USB cable that came with the box, plug directly into your computer, and offload media that way. And the last one, if you plan on using a remote, you're gonna need to turn on the IR. So there we go. Boom. Only me and porn stars. This is super helpful. This is how So the last thing we're gonna do is let's program the memory set for the 1, 2, and 3. It very easily transfers all of the values, frame rates, resolutions, shutter speed, all these things with one click of the dials. It's very easy. I'll show you how to do it. First, we want to be in movie mode. Then we want to change all of our settings that we want. So the aperture, shutter speed, resolution, all of that. Once that's all set, then we go to camera set memory and we designate where we want to save it. I'm going to save it on mode 1. Boom. There it is. Done. The only one that's a little tricky is if you try to program 240. Now you can just keep 240 in the S&Q dial, or you can program it to any of the numbers, which I do. In order to do that, you first have to change the dial to S&Q, then you do the exact same thing. So we're gonna go menu, change the resolution to HD, our frame rate to 240 frames per second, the shutter speed. Once we have all of those settings right, the same exact thing, we're gonna program that to slot, in this case, 3. 4K 60, 4K 120, and we got 240 S&Q mode. Which brings me to the sponsor of this episode, Squarespace. So I've been a proud paying customer of Squarespace for well over a decade. They've helped me tremendously as a creator by being able to sell my digital assets on my website, such as my creative color grades or my S-Log3 grades, or even some of my other funky ones like vintage frames, which just spicing up footage. Pretty much all of my websites have been on Squarespace, and it's for this reason. They make the design portion easy with drag and drop templates, and with their built-in commerce structure, they make getting paid very, very easy. Go to Squarespace today, use MakeArtNow for 10% off your first purchase. Tell them I say, yo. I know it's super daunting. I probably went a little fast. I apologize, but watch it a few times, buckle down, memorize the buttons. The sooner you do that kind of stuff, I think the better off you'll be, and you won't be nervous because you won't be like this in the menu. Those are my settings. If you like this camera cage, this is actually by Condor Blue. Full transparency, they sent this to me. I loved it so much. I actually had them help me build part of Marble Orbit using some of their designs. So really, really solid cage. I have nothing but good things to say about it. So give them some love if you're looking for a nice camera cage. Only porn stars and MakeArtNow use camera remotes. Guys, I'll see you next week. Like next month. Probably next, maybe like month after. I'll see you.
Pick up my color grades for this camera, the S-Log3 color grades. I give you guys all the settings. You don't even have to touch the camera. You can have all of my settings in your camera.